Good afternoon. I would like to thank the organizing committee for allowing me to make this presentation at these meetings. I will speak about intensification and beef production in Uruguay, contributions to sustainable products and processes. I would like to acknowledge my co-workers, Juan Manuel Clarichet from the beef scientist, Verónica Siganda, soil scientist, and Fabio Montosi, beef scientist. When the contents of the contents, I will make a brief introduction. Why this talk? I will speak about Uruguay, facts and the main beef systems, and the main issues of sustainability and meat quality. And finally, I will enter in final considerations. There is an increasing amount of people. Each year we have more, so we have to feed them. So we are expecting by 2050 to be around 9 billion people. So most of them from developing countries. When we look how is the global progress in food consumption, meat will be still increasing and will be the amount of meat that will be needed for feeding that amount of people will be greater than what we are doing right now. When we speak about sustainability as a principal target, usually we have the idea, we see it in most of the papers about sustainable and what really means sustainability. Usually have three legs: economic viability, social and environmental, and usually have global targets. If I focus on only on environmental, contaminant and damage reduction, conservation of non-renewable resources, biodiversity conservation, and landscape protection. But none of these are directly measured, so we cannot measure directly, and many times we go more for specific targets, and there we have water quality preservation, soil properties, greenhouse gases, air quality for reduction of contaminants, energy reduction and reduce of input use as conservation of non-renewable resources, and species preservation and habitat preservation as biodiversity conservation. And that is when we really start measuring sustainability. One of the main things when we are speaking about sustainability is each of these are very different or have different weight in each country. So many times that's one of the main reasons we don't have a unique index for having sustainability and understanding sustainability the same way, and changes from country to country. An agricultural system, for me, it should be, to be considered sustainable, it should enhance environmental quality and natural resource base, should minimize and make more efficient the use of non-renewable resources, satisfies human needs for food and fiber, sustain the economic viability of farm operations. Many times, if we don't have farmers, we don't have food. So this is quite a big issue. Many times I have seen sustainability spoken only from natural resources, but forgetting the human or the farmer as an important part of it. And finally, enhance the quality of life for society as a whole. Uruguay, just to make a small presentation of Uruguay, has 16.5 million hectares that can be dedicated to agriculture. This is 87.6% of the country, and maybe it's one of the countries that have more land being able to be for agricultural use. Location is 3035 south and 5358 west. Population, we are around 3,300,000. Rainfall in millimeters is 900 to 1,300, something around 40 to 45 inches. The average temperature in fall is 18, in winter 11, spring 17, and summer 23, but we have that is in degrees Celsius, but many times in summer we have over 35 degrees Celsius, 40 degrees. And the cattle is 11.4 millions and sheep is 8.2 millions. Vegetation is prairie, and we are energy dependent. We don't have our own energy, and that is very important in how we define our systems for production. If I go more for beef, slaughter, we have 2.16 million heads, 53% are steers, 45% cows and heifers. Traditionally grass-fed, but around 12% of steers come from feedlots, who goes mainly for export markets and are very dependable of the prices. Most of the system is purebred production system, with most being Hereford and Angus. Beef consumption per inhabitant per year is 60 kilograms of beef and 4 kilograms of sheep meat. The agricultural sector exports 73% of total exports of Uruguay. Beef exports are around 379,000 carcass tons. That's around 16.5% of total export of dollars, around 22% of the total agricultural exports. Russia, Israel, USA, China, Chile, Brazil, and Canada represents our 67% of our market of beef, but we have more than 95 markets. I will focus in the three main systems: cattle, mainly from range, where most of the farms are located, and more of the hectares in Uruguay are in that system. Agricultural plus cattle are farmers who do agriculture and work in cattle. And feedlots, which is around 100 farms, more or less, but it depends many times of the years and the business, which is possible. But the main will be around 100 farms. This is to show the percentage of usage of soil for beef, 1994 and 2009. Just pay attention to the green colors and how it has been shrink through this time, with much more area dedicated to agriculture during the high prices of soybean and other agricultural products. And it really has been getting smaller and getting into areas where the only thing that is possible is the raising cattle. If we look at the evolution of grazing land and stock ovine and ovine from 1935 to 2010, this is ovine, and then when prices decreased, it went down to almost 8 millions. This is our heads of cattle, and this is our grazing land. We are starting a study trying to compare 3 moments of grazing, and it goes 1950, 1980, and 2010. 2011 will be the correct number, where we have go to statistical data, and we have tried to make this and see with these 3 pictures how has been the evolution of cattle in Uruguay. What we did was using the whole country as a farm. We dedicated how much is natural grass or range in these 3 years of what is dedicated to cattle, then what is improved permanent pasture or improved seeded pasture, what is natural grass but with better with legumes and cabbage, with fertilizer and what is annual pastures and usually stubble. And what we did was decided to work the country as three farms with this proportion and the proportion of soils. When we look at the composition of the bovine and ovine herd, I will only focus on this, but it went from 8.1 to 11.4 millions. And this is the decrease in numbers of the sheep that we have. The next, and to take again, what are the parameters that help us to see and indicate how good are these indicators using the mean values of that years. Weaning has been increasing. Meat production per head was higher in 1951 than 1980, and now in 2012 again. How much has been the head daily gain? And focusing again in sheep and ovines, how much has been lambing, how much is head meat production kilograms per year, which have been reduced, and the head daily gain. So to that we work with the enteric methane emission with CO2 equivalents being 100, 1951, per kilogram of equivalent meat production. What we did was consider the wool and take it through a conversion factor to beef. And what we were able to see is from 1951 to 1980, more stocking rate, less individual production, but more production per hectare. So when I measure this by kilogram of equivalent meat production, in reality I'm producing much more. And from 1980 to 2012, better nutrition and individual production and lower age of breeding. So these are the main which explain that less methane emission during the last years. The second type of farms are agricultural and cattle farms, which are more related to the west. We are around here, Punta del Este, and here is where most of the cattle and agriculture farmers are. Agriculture and cattle farmers are more intensive in inputs, mainly stocker and finishing cattle, and use of concentrates and improved seeded pastures. This is mainly a photograph of what's going on and the main changes, which I think it quite clarifies most of what's going on. And the main changes in the last years have been cattle displaced in these farms to poor soils and lowlands and leave most of the land for agriculture. This have taken to a more intensive farm from a cattle point of view, so there is a greater use of concentrates, grain feeding for calves and for finishing cattle, and has started more attention for final products of cattle, seeing if they can get a better price because of that. With agriculture, silos have become like fungus in many parts of the country, mainly in that areas, so have really increased the production in Uruguay. However, these have increased public concern. There have been more environmental and water quality issues like phosphorus, more regulation, codes and laws, which I think is like in the last 2 years we have had at least 3. Each of these affect cattle and dairy producers and have resulted in alteration in management practices. And there is a high use of inputs may cause farm fields to a non-point source of pollution. In order to study that, we started a beef on farm research, but with farmers, which usually have another way of moving rather than research. Usually the farmer receives information from an economical point of view, prices and inputs, technology and social capital, political, and that is from local, national, and global, seeing what's the price of something. With this information, the farmer have the perception of profit and risk, make their own individual decisions, and this, again, this depends on the farmer's attribute and the farm characteristics, and again, he will take his decisions, which will have an impact, economical, environmental, and social, in his own farm, but the sum of these individual decisions will again have economical, environmental impact, and social impact in the three, local, national, and global. So many times when we start a long-time project, like 4 or 5 years, we will depend on price relations, inputs and outputs. In 2002, after 5 years, we work with FUCREA. It's an association of farmers, which usually are over the mean production of Uruguay. And we found there was a good relation between meat production and gross margin. And when we study the meat production, we see that stocking rate explained almost 53% of that increase in meat production. So we started a second work that was from 2010 to 2011, and with the idea that there were more inputs, more stocking rates, we started with nutrient balances for nitrogen and phosphorus. We have 24 farms for 4 years, like 96 situations, each 24 times 4, and we started working with it. However, when we checked after the project was done, this was what happened in 2002, from 1998 to 2002. From 2007 to 2011, there was the meat production didn't explain a better gross margin, as well as it did the other study. So studying, it was more management and decisions when to buy, when to sell, and type of cattle to buy, to sell, rather than focusing more in meat production. To these 96 situations, 24 farms, we study inputs and outputs of nitrogen, kilograms per hectare per year, and this is the average. This is maximum, this is minimum, and this is the median. And we see that the average was 925 per hectare of nitrogen. This was what entered by concentrate. This is nitrogen fixed by legumes. The total and the outputs, mainly we work with animal and feed, although there was some calculation of how much is lost in erosion. I will just present as inputs and outputs. And the balance of nitrogen, inputs minus outputs, was 42.7, and the efficiency was 15.8, which is a quite common efficiency when we involve all the systems on that in many things. Still 42.7, it's a number that is quite low. But what was more interesting is from that, almost 70% come from fixed nitrogen, from the legumes, fertilizers, and feed. This fixed nitrogen usually is incorporated into the soil through more complex, so it's not readily available and not ready to get lost from the soil. So many times it's quite good from an environmental point of view. We did the same with phosphorus. Phosphorus, we are having some trouble in some of the rivers where we have our main water. Inputs and outputs of phosphorus, again, fertilizer, feed 1.6, and the total, and this is how much is left. If I look for the balance of phosphorus, input minus output, that will be like 7 kilograms per hectare per year, and the efficiency 26.1. However, 9 farms were in negative balance, and from that, apart from that 9 farms, 25 situations within years were in equilibrium. So if I sum up there the losses for erosion, there was many of them were in negative. The third is the feedlot. Feedlot characteristics are quite different that we usually see in the US. We have no hormones, no use of hormones are forbidden in Uruguay, usually are between 90 days to 100, 110 days. Grain could be sometimes 60 to 70%, depends on the prices and the needs. Usually it's not really 90% of concentrate. Few pens, usually are farmers. There are very little big companies doing this business. And many times it's not economically viable in some years where really the reduction of numbers is big. And nowadays, the ones who are working are linked to a specific business to sell to Europe the meat. If I go to the annual number of feed yards, Uruguay is divided in 19 departamentos. That will be something around like counties. The annual capacity of heads, cattle slaughter in heads was around 154,000. So we started working in Iña to see what was going on. This is our small pens for 4 to 5 cattle, 4 or 5 heads, usually, which are hydrological, separated each one from each other. And we started working in compacted and no compacted when we did so many times in people are entering and getting out of the business, so many times it's not compacted, it's really not compacted the land or the soil, and that we wanted to just check what was going on and be possible to give some recommendation. This is collected, and it's collected as sample from all that comes here. We collect a sample, which is analyzed. And knowing the amount of water we have and how much, we have an idea of how much was the water in the pen. And this is for compacted pens, this is for no compacted pens. And nitrogen in compacted pens usually is higher and is going more in the runoff. And in non-compacted pens is lower, which means that some of that nitrogen is going down because if we don't prepare the soil, we may have problems with our underground groundwater, with our groundwater. With phosphorus, no, more or less happens the same. Phosphorus doesn't move too much in the soil profile, so we really have a difference in phosphorus. We didn't have any difference in phosphorus. This is when we plot nitrogen, total nitrogen against reactive phosphorus. This red is with animals, so we have a kind of make a line, so the same, more or less, always the same proportion of nitrogen and phosphorus are lost. But when we are speaking about no animals, really phosphorus began to be, even 3 months later, we get the cattle out, phosphorus is still a problem. This is part of the sampling, and also this here is for working for infiltration and runoff. In the same, we are sampling these feedlots and cattle pens. Actions, we are working with the ministries, agricultural and the environmental ministry, with farmers, Obscene, which are farmers which are very involved, INEA, the National Agricultural Research Institute, and the university. We are working on methane estimates and best management practices to get a publication, which is almost there, having the best management practices. It's slow when you have involved many different things, many different institutions and persons, but it's good in the sense that there's a lot of discussion and things are more realistic. The other thing we are working is in the risk-based management model. We are working what we call a risk matrix. We worked this already for dairy and have worked quite good. What says this is we have farms that may have a high geographic area risk or farm practice risk, and these are the ones who really we have to care. Secondly, the ones who are in a high geographic area risk, that could be near rivers where we get water or near underground water with kind of soils which can go down the profile, nitrates and phosphates. And then we have tried to consider some others which can be worked with best management practices only. What makes this interesting is that we don't have to spend the money in the equal size, but we can spend money in different, or we have different times in order to solve the problems, being these ones the more urgent to work. Okay, what about the product by itself? We have spoken about the process, but what about the product in these three types of farms? And this is part of what we have been doing from INEA and part of it in other experiments in Uruguay. This will be what pasture range, pasture plus supplementation, and this will be feedlot. This is saturated fatty acids, polyunsaturated fatty acids, conjugated linoleic acids, and the polyunsaturated fatty acids ratio with the saturated fatty acids, which I would like to be higher, and the omega-6, omega-3 ratio. And these are more or less we have usually, there may be a lot of saturated here and in here and with the pastures. Polyunsaturated, it's there. That depends mainly of what have been the diets. Some of these are experiment trials. And linoleic acid usually is greater when we fed pasture to the cattle. If I put it in a big picture, I could say that usually medium unsaturated fatty acid, unsaturated fatty acids, polyunsaturated fatty acid, linoleic acids, and this usually tends to move more to the pasture, while intramuscular fat, which is mainly explained by energy in the diet, and omega-6, omega-3 relation, is moved to feedlot. This is kind of big picture, but there's a lot to do to work to get the best of each of the systems. So the question is there room for improvement about sustainability, economical, environmental, and social? For farm range, we see that we could have, from an environmental point of view and production, we need to increase winning rate. It's still low. Decrease first mating age, which will help us to have less unproductive animals, and that will be less methane being produced. Decrease slaughter age, improve nutrition, concentrates, protein, and introduce legume into the range. That will help to get better the grasses that are around the legumes, and that will get better the digestibility. Adjust the stocking rate, no overgrazing, and pay attention a lot to animal welfare. Just to finish, if I have the beef, production, slaughterhouse, market, and consumers, usually production, farmers would like greater volume, more efficiency, better prices, of course. Slaughterhouse is looking for more consistency, no defects, but markets and consumers are looking for other attributes, That would be food safety, traceability, animal welfare, certification, brands, nutritive value, tenderness, flavor, environmental sustainability. Anything that can give us an added value. And that's the question. We have to work to get that added value from the market and consumers, since Uruguay won't increase production of meat in a big number, since it's a small country, but we need to be each time more work more for these other attributes. And with that, thank you.